I was going to go to the park today and do the video there, and then it started thundering. So I stay home. Plus my dad just went next door, so more ideal that way. The concern, however, she's very concerned because it's been thundering. She does not like thunder. Might have to pause to dope her here in a little bit, depending on how long that lasts and all that fun stuff. It's alright. Today seemed like a good day for this shirt because it did not start off the best. Okay, so Taz here has this new thing where he will bark in the morning. The barking is not new. The realizing he might need to go, or he might need to go outside. That became a thing after he's peed on my floor a couple times, and like massive flood kind of that, so that was not ideal. But so now the thing is, when he starts busting, I just go ahead and open the door. And this door is one that stays mostly shut. So if I like have it so the dogs can push it open, you know, it's still shut until they push it open. He usually goes out there and will lay on the couch after a while. They've discovered that they can occasionally sneak into the Shelties' breakfast time, which is annoying because, you know, they get theirs before then. They just try to get extra food, and sometimes it works for them, which is less than ideal. But they can. Ziva will come back, and she wants to sleep on her bed wherever I'm at. If I'm done in this room, we'll go, or I'll go open the bird room, the office, and she will go lay on the bed in there. She likes that bed better because it's one of the elevated ones, but she's going to be wherever I am first, unless I'm getting ready. Then she doesn't go into the bathroom that much. She has before. She still will, like, on occasion, but she doesn't just go in there and hang out. Like, Gidget has to be in there. She gets pissed if she's not in there while I'm getting ready. So there's that whole ordeal, right? So the door, Taz is barking, so I let him out, and the hall light's on, which means either mom or dad are out in the hallway, and usually they turn the light on and will, make sure there's no dark dogs in the hallway because it's really hard to see 4 mainly black dogs and the one gray little powder puff. They're very difficult to see in the dark hallway. So the light is, to make sure there's no tripping hazards. Yet today was a malfunction. So I see the hall lights on. So there's a possibility that somebody's in that space, right? I was going to the bathroom, which was like diagonally out across the hallway. And as I'm going to my bathroom, and I see out of the corner of my eye, my father is at the laundry room, standing there with no pants, no underwear, no nothing. Luckily, I did not have my glasses on and did not have my contacts in. I was still like half asleep. So I did not have to see anything. But that was enough that I did not need to see anyway. And it was really irritating. Yeah, he agrees. He probably also wants to be doped. He just likes the meds, I think. Here, you want to cuddle? Come cuddle. So that was not a cool way to start the morning. 444. And I go into my bathroom and it's like registering what just happened. Luckily, not. this is a new thing. It's not good. But it's not the first time that it's happened, because there was one night Gracie was supposed to have a sleepover, and she ended up deciding around midnight she wanted to go home instead. We had like a team meeting for the respite care stuff the next day, and she decided if she went home and slept at home, she didn't have to wake up for the meeting. So kind of clever on her end, right? So she goes home, and I went to bed. And then apparently, sounded like the door opened, but nobody's going nuts, so that can't possibly be the case. Hold on. Anyway, wasn't the case. Just thought I'd check. So Gracie went home, and I went to bed, and my mom was still out there in the kitchen. And she said, all at once, there's my dad, and he has no pants on. Not the Depends, not the underwear, nothing. It's like, gross. And she said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm getting a drink of water. And she said, you cannot be in here without pants on. Which is a good rule. Very good rule. And yeah, so that was the thing. She told me about it a couple days later, and I, of course, told my brother. And, you know, he and his wife had the conversation, and they're like, yeah, no more sleepovers. That's that has been cut off. And this morning, you know, after that whole ordeal, my brother sent me a message. Well, I sent him one last night, and then he responded this morning. And, you know, then we kind of started talking a little bit. And I told him what had happened. I said it's a good thing you guys moved to Oklahoma. And then I told him what happened. He's like, ah. And he said he didn't think that Mom realized that the sleepovers were done when they left, because, you know, she's still trying to use that as like some kind of argument or something. It's like, that no, that was just done, because if you can't trust that everybody's going to have their pants on when they should, like in community areas, then that's a very big concern. And we're not going to take the chance on the small child being around at a time when Grandpa's like out of his head and shows up without pants on. I don't want it. I don't want any part of being around that. Irritating as fuck that it's a thing that's going on now. But yeah, you know, and we were kind of when I was talking to my brother. Of course, he said that he didn't think Mom realized that, you know, the sleepovers were done. And it's like, I don't know if she even knew that I told them about that happening. And I said I was pretty confident that if she did find out that I had told them about that incident, that she probably would have been pissed at me, because that was the reason that they said no more sleepovers. That it's done. And he said, and I would have been even more pissed if you hadn't. It's like, I know. It's like, my view on things is we're supposed to protect the younger generations, right? We're not just supposed to raise them with the expectation that, well, this just happens when you get old, and this is probably something you're going to have to deal with, so deal with it. You know, it's like, they're like speaking. Okay, my mom pissed me off after my dad had his strokes, and we were bringing him back from the rehab hospital, because she kept asking him if he had to go to the bathroom, and kept saying that we had the urinal thing from his the rehab stay, and he could use that if he had to go, and like she was pushing him to have to use that, and made a big deal about, I'll just have to deal with it, I'll just have to not look. It's like, I'm driving, first off, but secondly, he keeps saying no, and you keep pushing this thing like you want me to have to deal with this, which again is something I'm not okay with. You know, and yesterday I actually drove home kind of infuriated at this whole thing. Anyway, okay. So, in my family, not really Not something anybody really is proud of or really likes to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it because that's what I do. So, there is, okay, so cold sores are a thing, right? And I'm sure that the great great grandparents didn't necessarily know where they came from or how they were passed or anything like that. But it was just like this ongoing history of acceptability that you get the kids drinking after you all the time, make that a normal thing, and then if you randomly have a cold sore, and then you may or may not freak out. I remember my mom freaking out at one point because when I was younger, and that was a normal thing. Then she has one, and I didn't realize she had one, and I took a drink of her drink, right? And she was like, "Oh, no, no, no." But it's like, if you know it's a thing, and you know that it can be passed like that, like you have an open thing, and you're drinking something, and it can be passed through, like sharing a straw or cup or whatever. That's the way that it is passed, right? If you are aware of that, why on God's green earth would you encourage your child to drink after you? And I've gone around and around on this whole thing for a lot of years, because obviously she knew it at some level, because she said something after, and that was the last thing. Like, we never shared another drink again after that. But it's like, why was that the thing that suddenly made it a problem to share? Why would we not have had some sort of awareness that maybe we shouldn't be sharing like that, in case you have this sore come up, and then the kid's not just automatically reaching for your drink because that's what's normal. So that's that's something that has infuriated me for a long time. And especially when I moved back up here and she's watching Gracie a lot, and she's still letting Gracie drink after her and sharing the drink with her. And I said, "What are you doing? You have no business in sharing with that child and allowing it to be okay to share the drink when you have these things that come up, and they can be passed that easily." And like my grandmother, in the past couple of years, I've heard her going on and on about being a third grade kid with a cold sore and how gross that was. And she just, like, the way she was talking about it, it's like, at some level you have to know how it gets passed along, and why is that okay? We're not supposed to be just creating new generations to pull them into our shit. We're supposed to be leaving the space better for them to have a better chance than we did. But like all the older generations, it's like, no, you just pull them into your shit, and they just need to expect to have to deal with this stuff. And you can just beat the shit out of them because, well, I was beat and I turned out okay. No, you really didn't, actually, because you're kind of an asshole. Like when I was working for the short-term family friend, he had a handyman business around here, and he ended up somehow being connected to my grandfather's breakfast club, and that was how he got some of his work, was through the people that really liked him with that, right? Well, the more he hung around, the more he kind of proved that he was kind of a bit of a fuck up, and yeah, would not completely finish things. Like, he fixed a roof for my grandparents, but it wasn't entirely fixed. And the same thing over here. We had a leak over the back patio, and he did some work on it, and then it was still an issue, so he's disappeared. Right? But it wasn't an immediately disappeared. I think the final nail in the coffin on his disappearing, as far as not having anything to do with my family, was the last job that I helped him with. We were building this wall to close off, like, these people had an upstairs, and there's a little bit of like a balcony thing and a little loft area, and they wanted to wall it off and have it be another bedroom. So, it was tricky because the wall had to be built up there so we could, just stand it up into place, but it had to like fit exactly, and like all this stuff, like all of the stuff that went into the project, right? The size of the room was big enough that we had the wall in there and had like maybe 6 inches going around the perimeter of the wall to maneuver. So we basically had to be mindful of where the studs were and stay there. And, there was, he hadn't been bad about it the entire time that I worked with him, but like, toward the end, he started getting back into drinking real heavily while he was on the job. And he kept disappearing out to his truck and, come back, and you could just kind of tell. And this one day he put like 6 fucking holes in the damn drywall because he was drunk and, didn't have a good sense of staying on the studs and all that stuff. So we had to patch these fucking holes in the wall that we were building that wasn't even standing up yet. That was a big pain in the ass. The bigger pain in the ass was when it came to painting. Because for the painting, that's easy. I can do painting. A lot of what I did for that guy involved painting at like the apartment complex where he was a handyman. Like, he stayed there, and like his rent was covered because he was their go-to handyman. Now, that meant he would have to be available if something went wrong in one of the apartments at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. So, but for a while it was working out. I did a lot of painting. Anyway, I was painting that day. When we were about done, he, in his drunkenness, knocked the paint can over, dumped paint on the floor. I was trying to clean it up, and he's trying to make a big deal about, not owning up to it. I was like, you're going to fucking own up to it. You're going to fucking go down there and talk to the homeowner and tell him what happened. And you're going to do it while I'm here, so I know you're not just blaming me. And I'm pretty sure he probably did blame me because I didn't go to where he was when he was talking to the homeowner. But I'm also confident that was the end of his business too, because he went to it like he ended up working for the school for a while. So that was exciting. There's a guy that apparently was doing some work for the neighbors, and like spraying kind of thing, spray for bugs. He was talking about ants and whatnot. But he was like going through the spiel. Well, when I got outside, because of course Taz is in the window, and the girls were trying to follow me out the door, trying to see what was going on, and I was trying to push them back so I could shut the door behind me. And he was like, he said that one in the window scared the crap out of me. He said it sounds like he could eat me. And he asked what kind he was, and I said he's a blue heeler. He said, oh, he probably could eat me. I was like, yeah, he probably could, but just, yeah. He's a big baby, really. But anyway, yeah. Yeah. Anyway. Stop. I really need you to stop. You're so good. You're so good. I know it. Right? Just, okay. Right there. Right there. Anyway. So yeah, I'm pretty confident, because I was sitting there trying to mop up the paint from the carpet that, he spilled and didn't even know he spilled it, which gives it more time to drip. I think it might not have been in the paint can. I think it might have been the thing I had used to, one of, like, the tray or something. I don't know. It wasn't a huge amount. It was still paint on the carpet. It was still something that needed to be owned up to. And I still knew, like, I could tell he was trying hard to just get out of there and not have to deal with it. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So yeah, it's like, but that guy, when he was doing work over here, so one of the things I helped him with was put a roof over the back patio, and also walled off we had this sliding glass door, like, ever since the room addition got put on, which was like the family room, bathroom, closet, and pantry. Right, so when we got that put on, it was like 91, and sliding glass door was there. Well, then we end up with, 4 dogs at one point, and I mean, we've had a lot of dogs. We decide, or like, I was standing in the kitchen one day talking to my mom, and of course we have, this dog door, and that, it basically just pushes the sliding door back and fits in that way, right? And it was fine, except, because we left it in all the time. So in the winter, there's always this gap where, like, cold air is coming in. And, we had it blocked off well enough, but it was still one of those things. It's like, okay, well, if you go in the backyard with the dogs, you're limited on how much door space you actually have, because only one side of this thing opened up. The other was just like a glass window. So it's like you cut off a big chunk of your doorway path with this dog door. So I'm standing there one day, and it's like, what if, I got their attention. It's like, what if we walled this off and put in a regular door and had the dog door just go through the actual wall and have a window over it. So then we still have the light better than, we would if we just had a wall there. But, then we have an actual door to go to the backyard, as well as be able to shut it completely when it's cold as fuck outside. And that was a good thing that we did, right? So, especially, I think in the past couple of years, there have been a couple times where it's been like, some kind of ridiculously cold, like 40 below wind chill out or whatever. It's like, I'm glad we we fixed that, because that would have sucked. And it was still an issue, like, as far as the dogs went, though, because the dog door was freezing. So I think we had a couple that got cut, like, on their snout because the damn door was frozen. It's like, shit, what do we do about this? So yeah, anyway, when we were doing that job, at one point, my dad's standing at the window that we put in and just kind of talking to me and this guy, as we're outside on the porch. And I don't remember if it was the roof job or if it was the wall job that, he was standing there for, or that we were doing, that my dad was talking to us on. But they were just kind of going back and forth and running their mouth, name calling and all that fun stuff, and this, talking about the damn snowflakes and, all this shit, and making a big deal about, well, I was exactly that thing, right? I was hit and I turned out just fine. It's like, no, you didn't. You're a fucking asshole is what you are. So, no, just, you're here talking like you're better than somebody, but at the same time, you're living that, like, the living evidence of the judgment, right? So you're talking about these people as this thing, but yet you're also demonstrating that you're not real nice either, or that you're not real nice, right? Period. So it's like, okay, and I get I think one of the most frustrating things with my perspective on things is I've always been able to see both sides, right? So I can see why they might talk about the other side this way. I can see why the other side would talk about them this way. And I get when I'm talking about it, it's like, well, you're kind of name calling and whatnot too. It's like, yeah, for this point in the storytelling, yes. It's like, this is why I've had such a struggle in my life with, like, finding what was actually mine versus being able to take on other people's stuff, right? Like, the ability to see both sides of it. It's like, what do I do? I don't know what's mine. I don't know how to deal with all these things. So I feel like it's been, basically my life has been collecting data, but collecting, like, all these points with all the ways that, my family has talked about everybody else and all their perceived flaws and all these things. And now that I'm trying to find and ground my sense of separateness from them, yeah, it comes out in the storytelling. It's like, I get I get the fact that I'm, kind of like in that story that I was kind of making fun of them for, like, the name calling and all these things, but at the same time not above name calling them too. I get it. And I know that, like I said, that's one of those things that's, like, been immensely frustrating, is since I've always been able to see both sides of it, I've perceived that as a flaw with me. And I now no longer think that, but it's still kind of a pain in the ass to try to navigate what's actually mine versus, what I've taken on from the world outside of me, and I'm now trying to navigate my way through, right? So, like, I've talked a lot about how, like, in the times in my life that I've been bullied by most of the people in my life, I'm not all of them by any means, but I think the ones that, okay, like the genuine bullies, like my grandfather, like my mother, like my father, like my cousin and his bestie, and or the one guy that my mom used to babysit, or the two guys that my mom used to babysit. It's like all these different, it's like there's always been somebody right there doing this shit, right? And I could always feel like I could look at them and see the wound they were living from, and because I was able to see the wound that they were treating me like shit because they felt like shit, I just turned it further on myself, right? So it's like, okay, so, like, for my mother, I can see how she spent her whole life trying to win daddy's affections and never got it. So that has been, but also never was able to have her own life. So she very much did exactly what she felt she had to do because of how my grandfather was, and never got to have her own life, right? So when she's living vicariously through me and my drumline stuff in high school, or whatever else I would try to do, I loathed it. Very much loathed it with her. But at the same time, it's like I feel like the biggest thing has been to some degree, because of the mother wound, I think, and realizing somehow I've held my mother and my grandmother to different standards than than like my grandfather and my father and like the others. I've talked a lot on here about my grandmother really pissing me off because I realized she was the first line of complacency with my grandfather, right? So she was the first one to buy into all his bullshit and enable him to continue being a dick and treating everybody else like shit, and she just allowed it to pass like it was some normal thing, right? So this is like one of the things that I've been struggling with on I don't know, a lot of things. Okay. Like well, especially with this whole nation, right? Like the idea of, largely white men. There's this idea that they're somehow like supposed to be, they're somehow better than others and whatnot, and right? And it's like they bring in women, specifically white women, but not exclusively, but always women that buy into their bullshit and will continue. They're basically the face of that first line of complacency. So they're women, so we should see how they're being inclusive because there's women's faces in front of us, but they're still spewing the bullshit from the toxic, distorted, masculine aspect, and just continuing to perpetuate the bullshit that is in existence currently, right? So like the reason the system is as broken as it is because all throughout or all along the way, there's the distorted masculine patriarchal types that go along spouting off how they're like better than everybody else, like especially if you want to like look at like religion at this point in time, specifically, like those trying to like the Christian nationalist movement kind of thing. It's like the ones spouting the bullshit, right? We've created this thing, this sick, awful, ugly thing that is going to abuse the shit out of you and suck the life force from you, and you're going to go along with it because that's what we want, right? So you're going to waste your life away, just like whittle it away, going along with the systems that we put in place to benefit us and fuck all the rest of you over. That kind of thing, right? So, and now, of course, as, especially as it's been more, as we want to see other faces and not just the old white dudes, old decrepit white dudes that just don't ever want to quit, and they exist as long as they do by sucking the life out of everybody else, right? So that's why like all our politicians have to be like right there with one foot in the grave, and the rest of us are draining our life force energy to slave away in the systems that they put into place to keep them going longer. It's like, what the fuck? No, that's not okay, right? But, we started, there were some women's rights things that came about, so then we wanted to see more women in places. So they found the ones that were women, but would go along and were complicit to the bullshit that they were spewing and still go along to keep those structures in place, but they're women, so you think that they're helping to bridge the gap or, you know, change things in some kind of way, because, I mean, at least it's not the old decrepit white dude. It's just the first line of complacency, right? The one that's not the old white dude with one foot that should be in the grave anyway. It looks different, but it's buying into that same system, right? Okay, so I made a comment in, I don't know if it was yesterday, I think it was probably yesterday's video, talking about that lady from the group the other night, and the USA on her nails. And when I was rewatching the video, it's like, I should probably address that a little further, because, you know, yeah, she has USA on her nails. Good for her, whatever. But the thing that annoys me with that, okay, we have this nice system in the United States with red and blue, right? That's like the only options we have, really. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that they're voting this way because it's better than the alternative. It's the lesser of the two evils or whatever. I've even said it before when I was trying to be a good Christian girl and all that bullshit. And, yeah. But, okay. So the system likes us to be locked into this or that, right? Because this is supposed to be here and that is not supposed to be here. And as long as it can keep us divided in that way, it can keep us divided within ourselves. And then, like, anything that we've been conditioned into thinking is bad, when we see that in ourselves, then we, like, assault it in ourselves. And, you know, like I've talked on here a lot, like this, even just a little bit ago, when I was getting bullied, I could see the wound that the other person was living from. I could understand how that was dominated, or it was like the big piece dictating how they were behaving, right? And I've always been able to make excuses for everybody else because I could see the wound, and I felt like it was somehow my job to fix the wound, right? Because I've always known that at some level I'm a healer. I just don't know what that looks like exactly. It's starting to make a little more sense. But like I never knew what it looked like or what I was supposed to do with it. I thought because I saw the pain, it meant that I was supposed to fix it somehow, right? But since I couldn't fix it, and since they continued to be assholes and treat me like shit, then I took it as there was something wrong with me, because the thing that I knew I was supposed to be able to do, I was somehow not doing, and just getting, like, emotionally assaulted for it. Like, you know, there was no way to make it go away. It was just my my lot in life, if you will. How did I get there? You know, I've talked on here a few times too. Not something I talk about a whole lot, because it's still one of those things. It's like trying. Okay, one of the issues that I have with the speaking through things is I've been collecting a lot of data, so I'm trying to make sense of a whole lot of data so I can go to the point. And obviously sometimes I lose my way in the one point and wandering into other stories and all that stuff. But as you start to address certain things, knowing they carry a lot of weight with them in the world that we live in presently, it's hard to really speak to them with clarity when you're first trying to navigate through it. So, one of the issues that I've struggled on here with a lot is like anytime I think about something where there is a racial theme, still struggling on that end of not trying to. Okay. We'll just use stories instead. When I was at Ball State, my freshman year, before my freshman year, high school, growing up, my entire life, this was a fucking white town almost exclusively. Like there were a few, very few other ethnicities along the way. And it was mainly just very white, right? So, and of course, it was one of those, the towns founded by the KKK or whatever. Yes, that's part of this town's history. And I remember, the field trip I've talked about, it was a French field trip, or French class. We went to one of the IPS schools downtown because for whatever reason, they were having a French play that, we were going to the play there. And the teacher went out of her way to tell us to behave, right? To essentially, not quite threaten our lives, but at the same time, there was that underlying theme of don't you fuck this up. And, like the one of the dudes, so when I've talked about in 7th grade band, it was my cousin and his stupid bestie that would like go on to make my life a living hell all throughout high school. But there was also the dude that was very much listening to what they were saying and believing what they were saying about me, and then, tried to. Basically, he was interested in me at one point, and the whole reason he was interested in me was because he was looking for some action, and he thought that since I had already had this experience that I didn't actually have, that I would just be willing to fuck him, basically, right? So, 7th grade, this dude, and I knew exactly what the whole thing was, but we went out for 3 weeks specifically because I was trying to use him as an example of, no, what you think is true about me is not true about me. But didn't exactly pan out how I had hoped, I guess. I like the deal. We ended up on a camping trip. He was camping with his Boy Scout unit, troop, and I was camping with my family. And we ended up at the same park, right? So we went on a hike together, and he's like groping me and all this shit. And so immediately after we got back from the camping trip, dumped his ass, told my friends how he was to, hopefully try to ease that whole thing with this idea of what everybody was believing about me, which he was trying to go for the experience, right? So since it didn't work out his way, he would go on to be the one who, I think he brought a knife to school or something, and he had a hit list, and me and all my friends were on it. Why was that? I bet it went back to 7th grade, honestly. So yeah, like that was one of the early layers of processing through the shit after Tyler died. Like that was one of the first bunch of healing that I was working on doing, and realizing that, like when that whole thing came up, and my best friend at the time made a big deal about, we're on his hit list. I remember looking at him, and I think there was like a cop with him because he was getting his stuff cleared out of his locker, and I just looked at him like, "You are fucking wasting my time. We both know you are not going to do anything." But all that because of the shit that my cousin was trying to keep alive and well, and remind people of all throughout grade school and all this stuff. That dude, anyway, not the cousin, the dude that got expelled for bringing a knife to school and having a hit list. No worries though, he came back. Anyway, he was one of those guys that would run around with like the Confederate flag and all this bullshit. And he was in the French class, and I remember, because the hit list thing, I think that was like sophomore year. If I'm remembering correctly, the Columbine deal was 99 because that was my brother's senior year in high school. And, well, I mean, not in Columbine, obviously, but because that was like one of the first big stories out there about like that kind of gun violence at school and whatnot. Obviously got everybody's attention, but that fit in because it got everybody's attention. So that kid's looking for ways to scare everybody and, whatever. I think the field trip was like junior year and he was back, so whatever. But he was one running around with his Confederate flags on his truck and all that bullshit. He was one that the teacher was specifically talking about with freaking mind your manners when we go to this field trip, right? So, yeah. But, I've talked about the field trip before too, and of course, that's kind of my interaction with any racial diversity at that point was teachers threatening us on our lives to behave lest we ruin things for everybody or whatever, and they're never able to have another freaking French field trip or whatever. Whatever. Anyway. I remember when we went to the school, and of course, I didn't really talk to anybody back then anyway. Like even my peers, like I had a very small group of people that I would actually speak to, and otherwise just try to block everybody else out. But at one point, there's a kid from the IPS school, and he looks at me and says something about a bunch of crackers or whatever, and I kind of chuckled because the first thing that came to mind for me was I know a whole lot of flaky white people, and sometimes I am a flaky white people. I'm not going to deny that. But it's like I know a whole bunch of them, and I'm related to a whole bunch of them, and yeah, I have my moments, so I can't fault that. And I just kind of chuckled that was the experience, right? But when I went to undergrad, this was my first real experience in a diverse environment. I had this assumption that nobody of any other race would want to associate with me just because I was white, right? So, like, that was the environment that I grew up in basically shaped that for me. So when I got to undergrad, I was in marching band the first semester, and the two people that I I started, of course, keyboards were like my favorite, right? I absolutely loved a marimba. And then I get to, but I didn't know how to read music, and like my thing with music was I would write the notes in until I had it memorized, and then I would just like scrap it. And then but I never could read music. It's like it just does. My brain takes forever to translate, and it was just never something that I was just able to do. So I cheated. I wrote in the notes, and then once I had it memorized, then I didn't have to worry about it again. And then as things got changed along the way, we'd practice them enough that it wasn't a problem, right? But it was like I almost always had to write the notes in. And when I got to undergrad, that was no longer a thing I could do. Like there were people that I actually could read music and were there majoring in music. So it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. So I ended up switching from Pitt to the cymbal line, which I never marched. The fuck was that all about, right? But when I was since it was my freshman year, there were two other freshmen that I kind of connected with and bonded with. But the first of them was a black girl. And we were walking back to the band area to put the cymbals up. And she started talking to me. And I remember like hesitating and being like, she actually wants to talk to me? It's like, what? Like that was completely new to me. I thought because of like how the community that I was raised in, I thought that people just wouldn't want to associate with me because I was white, right? So that was literally my thought process, my perspective, and everything. That girl ended up being like one of my good friends for a while. We did eventually go our separate ways, and it was not it was not pretty. But yeah, but that first encounter, and she's talking to me, and it's like, what do I do? Is this okay? And yeah, so it's like, why wouldn't it be okay? Right? But still, just that experience was just, I mean, I get that that's a silly story to have, but it's a story that I have because it's something that actually happened, right? So it wasn't just like this made up thing that, because of this expectation, that was actually true. It's like the expectation that I had, that I've been taught or conditioned into believing was the case, ended up not being the case. So then it's like, okay, so what does this mean for reality? But anyway, there's been like lots of little stories like that, right? So then too, even realizing how it's like, okay, when you have the idea, the expectation of something happening or something being true, then basically the universe will line you up with things to show you that it's true, right? So it was really a struggle when I was doing the YouTube thing, when I started doing the YouTube thing. And June last year, I was trying to talk about a story that involved the racial stuff, right? So, the story that I was telling was, I've told it obviously multiple times here before. It was my mom and my sister-in-law and I went to Costco. My sister-in-law just loved Costco and wanted to show my mom the Costco, right? So they were up here from wherever they were living at the time, and we were going to Costco it was me and my mom and my sister-in-law. It's fine. It's like, I think one of the first times we met her. And they were pretty involved in their conversation and all this stuff, right? So I do like I do, and kind of like I wander and kind of mind my own business and pop in and out of like the different things that are going on around me. In conversations as I get pulled into them or whatever. But when we got to the checkout, this was the one. When we get to the checkout, we are behind these two black women and this little, like, probably 4-year-old boy sitting in the front part basket thing of the cart. And they're unloading their groceries onto the conveyor belt. They're having their own conversation. My sister-in-law and my mom are having their conversation. And this little boy is swinging his feet and kicks off one of his flip-flops. And I was like, obviously I'm not going to let him just leave his shoe. It's like, what do I do? It's like, do I tell them? Do I just... So what I did was I picked it up and I was going to put it in the seat next to him, just so he would have it with him and they wouldn't lose it and wonder where it went or whatever, whatever else they had going on. And he holds his foot up. Now, I'm like early 20s. I was a little 4-year-old boy dropped his flip-flop on the floor. And, I'm still largely conditioned by the community that I've been in, that has told me that, black people aren't going to want to associate with me just because I'm white. And my experience of the white people that I've had to associate with, they're not always ideal either. But anyway, with the kid, right? So I pick up his flip-flop. He holds his foot up for me to put the shoe back on. It's like, you don't reject the little child. The little child held his foot up for assistance, so I helped him, right? So it was just like easy enough. I just like had my fingers on the edge of his flip-flop and just stuck it over his foot. And he gets this real thoughtful look on his face. He says, "White people helped." And I was just like, it was like, it just like sucked the oxygen out of that space. It's like everybody was suddenly very aware of like that there was something happening there, right? It was just like, I don't know what to do with this, and he was just like so innocent and just this little 4-year-old kid, just really thoughtful, and white people helped. And it was just like a really weird experience, and just kind of, there was a moment where the oxygen was sucked out of it, and I think there was a good chance that everybody was kind of holding their breath to some degree throughout the entire rest of their time there before they left. And we went through the checkout. But then when we went through, when we were outside, I remember thinking, of course, mind you, I have a very, very open connection with, that inner voice, that intuitive voice, whatever you want to call it. And I was thinking, it was like, how sad is it that they would teach him that it's not okay to, or that the white people can't ever help. And that wasn't exactly it, but there's something along that lines. But the response I got back was, what world do they have to live in where that is how they keep their child safe? It's like, one I am not okay living in. And like that was like the big thing, right? So with that story, the first time I tried to talk about it on YouTube, I was outside and I was sitting in front of the shed. And of course, it's one of those stories that it's really kind of a struggle to confidently approach, because it's easily not something that would make a lot of people happy for various reasons. It's just one of those things that's like, it's just a sticky conversation to have, right? But anyway, as I'm trying to tell this story, I end up getting shat on by a bird. So that was exciting. Didn't notice it while I was telling the story until, like, I think when I went back to watch it later, it's like, did I just get pooped on? I just got fucking pooped on. And it was funny because I remember going inside after I had done that video and, like, at one point looking at my shirt and was like, what do I have on my shirt? Where did that come from? And then I saw it when I was watching the video back. It's like, oh, cool. And then I was talking about the same thing and how I inadvertently ended up manifesting this bird shit on my shoulder because I was talking about something that, to me, I had been made to feel was such a sticky thing that it was not necessarily okay to talk about, and I'm trying to talk about it anyway. So then the universe provides me like this opportunity to get shat upon. It's kind of like a means of are you supposed to be talking about this? And it's like, yeah, before I would have taken that as a sign that I wasn't supposed to talk about that. But I realized it's something that's my discomfort in trying to talk about it was kind of the thing that brought on the other thing. So it's like what I would assume it was the universe's way of saying, don't talk about that. That wasn't it. It was, I drew that to me because I already believed it, right? So that the whole believing is seeing piece that I talked about yesterday and that I've talked about occasionally. It's not seeing as believing, it is believing as seeing, because what you expect to be true is what you're going to see more of, because, you know, you're lining up with it. We're co-creating with the universe. So if you're putting out the stuff where you're supposed to hesitate and, you know, have issues talking about things and not being open about things just because it's hard or scary, because that's been your experience, then, well, the universe will show you things to make you further believe that you probably shouldn't be, but that's not the case. Right, so, yeah. But, you know, that going back to that piece of how that's just one of those, well, okay, like I talked about a lot with the civil rights movement stuff when I was like in third grade. And yesterday, the thing that I was talking about was, I absolutely think it's something that needs to be learned about, but I don't think it's something that needs to be learned about before a child knows themselves. However, the world that we have existed in has very much been about, you know, children are to be seen and not heard, and, you know, all these things. Like, basically, the system sucking the life out of the children by trying to grow them up before, you know, okay, like, going back to, like, the bit that I do agree with from the biblical studies era with becoming like little children, to connect with the divine, because when you are in that or when you are in that space of the true essence of who you are, that's when you're most connected, or most like, that's, yeah, I get most connected, I guess. We're connected to the divine, right? We're all divine beings, but we get born into this world that tries to force all this conditioning on us to make us behave and fit a certain way. But that's not what we're here to do. We're here to be the fullest expression of who we are in our being here. Like, what is it that lights you up? What things make you the happiest? Follow those. We're supposed to be able to be happy, but the system doesn't want us to believe that, because if we believe that, then we're not able to be controlled like the system wants to control us. And like this whole government system likes or wants to maintain control. So it's like, you know, having temper tantrums because everything is connected. So the Christian nationalist groups and, like, you know, the political structures in place or whatever, it's like they're getting louder and more ridiculous because at some level they know their power is slipping. And the more we connect with others, okay, the more we heal our own self, and we come back to the essence of who we are and connect with people also in that space, the less control the system has over all of us. And it doesn't like that. Right? So, like, when I made that comment about the lady with the USA nails, okay. First off, the first day I was back for the class, she was telling some story, and she was talking about how she went on this trip and there was somebody that she had gone with that she shouldn't have gone with, and blah blah blah. And she basically said it was basically somebody she didn't have as much in common with as she would have thought she would have, and she pointed me out. Because this is always how it works, y'all. I'm new to her in this space. I've been in this space many times before, but I'm new to her in this space, right? So she's telling this story, and she looks at me, and obviously my hair's got the colors, and she said something about, it's like if I were to go with her based only on the fact that, she's got the colors in her hair. And, apparently she has purple hair, but apparently it looks more white or gray. Her colors don't stay, and that was something we briefly talked about that night. Will you knock it off? No. Hey. Put this in your mouth. No. No. Gidgy, let him have it. So anyway, but she like pulls me into it just because of my hair, right? So, kids are bickering. I'm gonna lock y'all out. Anyway, he's still gonna bark at me. But it's like she pulled me into it because she saw my hair, and she had a hat on her head when she's talking about, because we both have colored hair or whatever. It's like, okay, but then when I saw her afterwards, it's like she didn't look like she had colored hair. But she brought me into it, right? So that's okay. I've talked a lot about like the Leo Venus and whatnot, and this is so I basically, when I am most in tune with who I am and expressing as I am meant to express, it's the bright, colorful thing, and that's me being colorful, right? I like color. So another thing, for June last year, I talked about one of the things that I feel like I'm meant to do is just get out and be seen. And I know that sounds kind of vapid, but that at some level, that is what I am here to do, because at some level, I've talked about this too. It's like me being able to do whatever. I mean, my hair needs work again. Me being able to dress how I want to dress and, be the bright, colorful mess that I am. I'm only able to do that because I've finally come to a place of feeling safe within myself. So as I am more safe within myself and, can express more like I've always been drawn to, I kind of... Okay, example. Yesterday, wasn't wearing this shirt obviously, but I was still colorful. And I don't honestly remember what shirt I wore yesterday, but when I went to my doctor's appointment, there's this building that I'd never been into, and I'm walking down this long hallway, and there's these two ladies with these two little kids that are walking through. And this little girl is probably like 3 or something. She's getting ready to walk past, and she looks at me. She's like, "I like her hair," and she just kept commenting to how much she liked my hair to her mom, and she was really excited. But it's like, that is a big part of it. It's like something about my ability to be the full expression of who I'm here to be, and a big part of that for me is the expression of that through the being colorful, and as much color as we possibly can. There's a scrunchie in there somewhere. It's 2 of them. I think they go with the orange today. Like that's me. And part of the being seen aspect is that's me. I show up somewhere, and people tend to notice to some degree, whether they like it or not. And I'm not going to stop doing it. Okay. The one that was the most uncomfortable was when I went with my brother and sister-in-law to take Gracie to her eye doctor appointment. And there's a little bit of, like, the space starting out. I had gone to the bathroom and Gracie went with me. And when we were walking to the waiting area, because my sister-in-law was going to get us checked in, and my brother went out to the car because Gracie had forgot her glasses in the car, so he had to get those. And then after she was checked in, my sister-in-law went to the bathroom, and I was sitting in the waiting area with Gracie, and they called her. It's like, oh no. It's like, her mom and dad aren't in here right now, so it's like this big uncomfortable thing. But I ended up going back with her, and then I sent my sister-in-law a message. I was like, hey, they're taking us back. I get there and the lady's asking me questions. It's like, I honestly do not know the answer to these. It's like her mom just like stepped out to go to the bathroom right before you guys called us back. So she kind of worked with Gracie on some other stuff until Jen got there. Well, once Jen got there and then my brother got there a couple minutes later, it's like, this space is not big enough for all of us to be in here. So it's like, I'm going to go back to the waiting room. Right. So I go back to the waiting room, and I don't remember exactly what I was wearing, but I think the leggings were bright and colorful that day. And I had my sparkly boots, my sparkly combat boots, with the purple laces that are technically skate laces, but whatever. And I think a black shirt and a hoodie over it, and then like my hair, just me. And I go back to the waiting room, and I sit there, and there's this couple walking around. They're like Mennonite or whatever. It's like, I know they're like, there's the seat next to me. It's like, I know they are like trying to decide whether they should just avoid me and like avoid sitting there, or if they're going to sit there. It's like, I can just tell that my being there is making them uncomfortable, probably more than the usual crowd would make them uncomfortable. But they ended up sitting there, and it was fine. But when they get done with Gracie's appointment and come out, we go around to the little corner. My sister-in-law goes in this little in the room with the glasses, and she's talking with them, and my brother and I are standing outside of that room. And I was like, I think I made those people uncomfortable. And he kind of laughed at me. He was like, I would expect as much. It's like, yeah, but for better or worse, this is a part of what I am here to do. So that's kind of a weird thing to have to come to terms with as well, because like I said, it kind of sounds vapid if you just say, well, I meant to be seen. Okay, cool. I know that's part of the case, and I know why, or some level of why, but at the same time, it still sounds and feels weird, right? But going back to this lady, right? So she pulls me into the conversation only because of my hair. And okay, like for the little kids especially, I feel like, in general, I think the biggest part is people can feel my energy already, but the appearance makes it make more sense, right? So like that little girl, I think what she was more responding to was my energy, but because she's got a limited frame of reference, she just called attention to the hair. But and like frequently, especially with little kids, like I get the compliments on my hair because that's what's so obviously noticeable. But it's like the energy is still there, but people might not register exactly what it is. So this is just like a way where they can point to that as something that's different about me. But yeah, like the lady that said it was like we would get along just because we had like their like her trip or whatever, like the person she ended up going with, it was like the expectation of that we would just get along because we had brightly colored hair or whatever. And of course, you know, then there's comments about I'm the unicorn, or we're unicorns or whatever because of the colors and all that. But like when she started talking to me last week about why I would possibly want to go to Oklahoma, and not knowing anything about me, and I'm not trying to judge you, but also saying it in a way that's expressing that you are very clearly judging me already. What I was thinking about later, I was just like, you know, I spouted off something about the USA nails, and like the big thing with that is like going back to that this or that, right? It's like she sees what the red's doing and she's like all anti that because, well, she's the blue. But she sees me as going to this space where the red is in power and trying to, I mean, essentially jacket shit off all over everybody else in the state because, you know, because it can. She's judging me as she sees me as somehow connected with the red. But it's like when I had my little moment of my tirade in my head and going off of honor in my head and talking of, like, one of the things that came up was her USA nails. And it was like the thing that really hit me when I was like processing through that. It was that point of a problem cannot be resolved at the same level of consciousness that created it. So right, so like red and blue, they're neither one of them are going to fix anybody or anything, because ultimately they're both being controlled by the system itself, which, you know, is like the big corporations or whatever that are pouring all their money in. So it's like all appearances. It looks like something, but it's not actually what it, you know, what you're being made to believe that it is, because there's like this underlying current of crooked type corporations and shit pulling or pushing the buttons, right? You know, all the rest of us are just like the puppets on the string, right? So red and blue are puppets on the string for what's actually going on underneath, right? So they're not going to fix the problem. They're a big part of why the problem exists. But, you know, and even then, you know, when I was thinking about that, like with the they're not going to fix it. I had a thought and then I looked out the window and I lost the thought. They're not going to fix it. They don't want to fix it. It is a part of. It's just what they've all accepted, right? I will get there. I will work this out. The big thing being, okay, foundations. So, I think especially with my generation, not only and exclusively my generation by any means, but especially my generation, what we are here to do is a lot of us fit into this transmuting the density thing. We're very incredibly aware of the things that aren't working out and how we've been injured by the system itself, but there's a lot of like substance abuse and addiction issues, essentially as a means of numbing the pain. And where that comes in is that dissonance piece is there's so okay, the system is so badly contrasting what we are actually here on this planet to do, which is to create something beautiful, right? And the system has made it this big ugly thing. And, you know, it's just all these energetic cords getting pulled this way or that, right? And, you know, like, I've been extremely frustrated at times with, like, the red, and, you know, how it's, these things are ways that I've seen it actively play out in a not helpful way, but then not really knowing just what it was about the blue that wasn't, that I had issues with, because I couldn't name anything specifically, because my experience was more existing in that space of what I was being fed, the conditioning of the red side, right? So since I didn't have the full balance, you know, it's kind of relying on what other people are saying and trying to make sense of what I'm hearing. But what I realized is, like, going back to my family, is it's kind of the first level of complacency to some degree, because the this or that system, where this belongs and that does not, it's just the other side. It's the contrast, the opposite end. It appears to be trying to pull things in the other direction, but at the same time, it doesn't give a shit about anybody else, about anybody healing, any more than the other side does, the red side, which is, like, just all about control and domination and, you know, taking over everything, right? So then I'm thinking about, like, foundations, right? So, okay, those of us who are here to transmute this dense energy, that we pick it up, and a lot of us have struggled with, like, immense apathy, because that was, like, a huge chunk of my life has been lost to apathy. And it's like, how do you make yourself care in a world where you're actively seeing it doesn't care about you, and, you know, trying to make sense of, like, the navigating the space, and then, you know, realizing it's, like, a big part of that dissonance is because that's what we're here to do. We're picking it up to make sense of it and turn it into something else. So, you know, I've always had this sense that change was coming, like, largely through music, right? And, you know, so, like, this twin flame connection, I'm making sense of it with the little bit that I can see of, you know, what his you know, musical stuff, being on the stage, you know, being in the spotlight in that way, and the figure of who he is as he presents to social media and whatnot, right? But I've always had the sense that, like, it's largely coming through music, and what I've noticed is, you know, especially as I'm, like, working through this stuff myself and trying to make sense of it, things are changing, right? It's like, as I do my own healing work, as I release the density that I've picked up and make sense of it, you know, this is one of the things that I'm supposed to do, is to put it out in this means where I'm talking through it and making sense of it, often as I'm actually making sense of it. Not always, but it's usually pretty close. But, you know, like, when I see people associated with him on social media, it's like, I've noticed that there are a lot of people trying out different means of expressing their creativity as well. So it's like, there's definitely something going on, like, this deeper level, right? So it's like, you know, and what I've seen of, like, what I'm making sense of with the connections in my life, where, like, the toxic life sucking cords, right? It's like in the music community, as they are learning from each other and stepping into greater levels of expressing their truth, it's the opposite of the life sucking, right? The life sucking chords that I've always been like strangled by in my whole life. It's like as I'm releasing some of this, and they are, or they've been, you know, like through the networking, they're strengthening the connections that they have with others in the music community, and you know, they're creating another way of being. So the system that we're used to is one where only certain individuals are able to survive in any kind of way. And yeah, I remember, okay, so there was this big thing. Granted, my parents, going back to that red thing, my parents are all about watching the Fox News bullshit and whatnot. Or they used to be. That there's just, there were some issues with the cable. My dad threw a temper tantrum and told Xfinity that he wasn't going to have their product anymore. But then they lost a bunch of channels, and like the TV has been ridiculous to try to make sense of and try to watch anything on. So Fox News finally went away. But there's something else that is, you know, I remember when Fox News started up, it was like this, they kept pushing the idea of fair and balanced or whatever. It's like, they're not. It's like that went red in a hurry. But I remember they were watching something during the pandemic, and had like Nancy Pelosi or whoever showing off her 2 fully stocked refrigerators when like there's this big struggle for anybody else to get like food to go to the grocery store. It's like this whole ordeal, and toilet paper was a problem, for God's sakes, and like all these stupid things like that. It's just like, y'all, the people that have been in power have no business being in power. And so what this generation is doing is transmuting this density, seeing it for what it is, and the, you know, the toxicity where some benefit while others are like very much struggling to survive, and while the systems in place for work are just there to suck the life out of people and to keep them from having a full experience of life with their family. Like, they don't get any enjoyment out of their family because they're having to work like a ridiculous amount of time and throw their lives away to that bullshit. So to somebody else can have like these, like the several $1 million golf trips or whatever the fuck, so many times a year or whatever. It's like, this whole system is not working. But you know, like I've always had that sense that music is where the change is coming from, and a big part of that is like the networking, and they're figuring out how to strengthen things for, I mean, maybe for the music community, but also those, I mean, everybody listens to music, so it's like at some level it benefits all of us, and like we're all connected to that energy, because when we listen to their music, that's why, you know, there too, that like religion has wanted to demonize creativity, because as we step into the fuller expressions of who we are and we create from, you know, from the space of what lights us up, that brings that divine light to be shared with others in the world. And, you know, as we connect that way, it's strengthening the life-giving chords and disconnecting the life-sucking chords more so. So like, it's like we're all unknowingly collaborating together in this energetic thing that's happening, and creating something better. So, when the thing that exists that doesn't work, when that goes away, we'll have something better in place, right? But in order to build a foundation, you have to completely get rid of like the stuff that's going to like weaken the foundation, right? So, so when I'm yelling at the lady with the USA nails in my head, it was, you think that this side is bad, and you do not see anywhere your side has also been bad, or has been complacent and inadvertently perhaps allowed for the system where one side is so extremely toxic and trying to going back to just jacking off on all the rest of us because they're trying to spread their bullshit and making the rest of us suffer for it, right? But it's like they're two sides of the same coin, and they don't give a shit about actually healing and making this space better for the rest of us and for the whole of us, all of us. As I've said many times, if the system doesn't work for even one of us, it is not a good system. And this system has very much thrived in, killing off whole groups of people. So that's not a good thing, right? The whole fact that the foundation of this nation was built upon killing indigenous people, that's a problem. That is not a good foundation to have out there. And yet that is the foundation that this freaking nation sits on, right? So that's not a good one. And so, yeah, I'm all about the deconstructing of the whole thing because it doesn't work for anyone except those very few that that are able to get their way, right? And yeah, it's all about illusions. So anyway, an hour and a half in, it's still thundering, and my dogs are quiet, but not sure really why Gidget's not whining at me since it is still thundering. But I'm gonna go, and I'm probably gonna go spend some time cleaning my office because it needs some work, and I'm wanting to get back to that packing things and moving shit back to the storage unit to clear up space here further and demonstrate that I'm making space for the new to come in. That's the big thing. So, as always, I appreciate you. Until the next time. See ya.